All right. Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Hopefully you all had a great weekend. And thank you so much for tuning in. I want to start first by issuing an apology. I know I was supposed to do a video back on Sunday, which was going to be covering the tropical system impacting Southern California, specifically the remnants of Hurricane Hilary. But unfortunately, I had some things come up, so I wasn't able to do that. But that being said, I did direct you guys over to some other phenomenal, fantastic live streamers. One of them being Max Velocity, and I'm totally blanking on the other, but I did link both of their streams on my Twitter account, so they were providing phenomenal coverage throughout the day, and since I wasn't providing a video, I wanted to direct some people over to them, so of course, they didn't need me. I think they were doing just fine in terms of their live streams, but, if I wasn't going to be providing coverage, at least you had somebody else to go to, and a huge shout out to those folks that were live streaming yesterday. That certainly helps out tremendously in providing people, information and keeping them informed and really just disseminating information in a way that people can understand. So there's a lot of really great live streams yesterday. I shared a couple of those with you on the social media platforms, so be sure to check those out. I think they have recaps on their channels, and I welcome you to do that because this event was certainly historic in so many different levels, and we talked about that later on this past week. Right around Friday, I believe, we talked about that the rainfall really was the storyline here. And it ended up being the case. We had quite a bit of rainfall amounts. We're going to talk about how much rain fell over California before we then turn our attention to the major historic heat wave that's going to be impacting the central part of the United States. So both of those are going to be covered separately. Just like with the other videos, I will have chapters in between, so if you want to skip around, you want to go to the heat wave coverage, you want to talk more about the rainfall, you certainly can have that opportunity to kind of move around and meander through the video. But that all said, if you do enjoy today's video, be sure to like and subscribe, and also be sure to share with family and friends that will be impacted. And by the way, that is going to be a large swath of the central United States. I don't want to necessarily give any spoilers out, but you certainly are going to see much of this area circled in red being impacted by the heat wave for the rest of the week, from Monday going into late into the work week. But let's start first with kind of recapping what we're seeing here in the United States. We do have a lot of our main jet flow essentially being demarcated by these stratiform showers and thunderstorms across much of the Pacific Northwest, even getting back up into the upper Midwest. And I would say a few rumbles of thunders with these, but otherwise pretty stratiform rainfall. Here we have the remnants of what was Tropical Storm Hilary impacting San Francisco and up into Northern California, and eventually making its way up into the Oregon-Washington vicinity. That's going to continue to move off into the northeast, and as I drew for you guys, this jet flow is sort of riding over top of this area of high pressure, which is essentially centered right here in the south central United States and around the Central Plains. This ridge is expected to continue to expand throughout the week. So right now it's sort of in this periphery, right? We have this sort of ring of fire pattern, if you will, where a lot of your main jet flow rides over top of your hot air dome. Well, the center of this ridge, which as we drew is over here in Kansas and Nebraska, is going to continue to meander to the northeast. So the extreme heat that we're seeing right now in the Central Plains and are expected to see later on again today, that's going to continue to expand into areas like Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, even back towards the lower Great Lakes, and also for our friends in the Deep South, which could be seeing heat indices well into the 100s. And then last but not least, for Texas, you guys will not see any relief in terms of cool down. You do have, though, some area of showers and thunderstorms that is essentially moving through the Gulf of Mexico, getting back into the Texas coast, the Gulf shoreline of Texas. And basically how that's happening is you do have this easterly flow that's moving over the Gulf. And that's going to be what fuels development for tropical systems later on this week. We're going to be doing another video that's going to be separating that and sort of talking about that. We'll give you guys an update today on where we could expect some things, but there is some developments in the Gulf. There's also latest updates relating to the Atlantic. So let me sort of preface by saying that we won't just talk about the heat. We will also, towards the end of the video, be talking about the tropical weather updates. So stay tuned for that. As I said before, be sure to like and subscribe, share with family and friends that are going to be impacted by these two events. So we're going to start first by recapping the rainfall amounts that we saw across much of Southern California yesterday, even getting back into Saturday. And the worst hit looks to be Los Angeles County and points eastward. And we're going to focus on LA because we certainly have seen some very high rainfall amounts over this 24 to 48 hour period. We have localities reporting anywhere between really 3 to 7 inches of rainfall, and we are experiencing still flash flooding conditions for the region. Now, the good news is this tropical system has moved off to the northeast, so we're not seeing much rainfall anymore. That's moved now onto Nevada and portions of the Pacific Northwest. But, of course, those living in these localities are certainly still waking up to some flooding conditions, which should hopefully subside here in the next couple of days. As the tropical system, or the remnants of Hurricane Hilary, move out of the region, we now turn our attention to another major storyline for the lower 48, and that's going to be the extreme heat that we see encompass much of the central United States from today getting into Thursday, for portions of the upper Midwest getting back into the south central United States and even down towards the Gulf, where we currently do have a large swath of excessive heat warnings encompassing the region. We also do have some heat advisories currently for much of the Chicago metro, and even an excessive heat watch that's going to take into effect for Wednesday and Thursday. Now, for those folks living in Chicago and Milwaukee, we're going to talk about this kind of intermingling throughout the temperature forecast towards the end of this discussion. But what I want to mention right out of the gate is the reason why we do not have any excessive heat warnings in effect right now is because there are still some variability that we have to factor in, with really the main thing being a lake breeze that could potentially fire off the lake right around the Wednesday-Thursday timeframe, and that may help to shunt some of those warmer temperatures along the lake shoreline. That being said, I still do expect some excessive heat warnings to eventually be issued for localities away from the lake shore, from both the Chicago and Milwaukee metro, so way inland to where we may not see much of an effect on that lake breeze. We should expect to see much of the temperature inversions be mixed out to where those temperatures at the most reach anywhere between 99 to 104. So I just wanted to put that caveat there, and the reason why that's the case as to why we're not seeing these excessive heat warnings right now is because of the fact that there is still questions relating to the potential lake breeze that may actually help to shunt some of those warmer temperatures near the major metropolitan cities of Chicago and Milwaukee. But nonetheless, as I've said, I do expect those to be upgraded more inland for some of those western suburbs of Milwaukee and Chicago, where we do expect those temperatures to be warmer away from the lake. I also want to start first by taking a look at this morning's sounding. This is from Dodge City, and this is an observed sounding. And so one of the things I want to highlight for you here is the current observations. And we had a morning temperature at 7 a.m. in Dodge City of 74. Now keep in mind, this is a temperature inversion that you see. If you see the temperature increasing with height slightly, that's what we call a warm layer aloft. And why that's important, and the reason why I bring this up to you guys, is because this type of weather sounding we are going to see for many of the localities mentioned across the central United States from Monday getting into Thursday. And so what that means is as you get warming throughout the day, as the sun continues to rise and you get an increase of diurnal heating, well, that warm layer aloft is going to be mixed down to the surface. So if you mix that out, and assuming you mix all that inversion out, you could be seeing temperatures anywhere between the high 90s, even getting into the low 100s for a place like Dodge City. So that's why it's really important to keep tabs on these morning observations over the next couple of days, because that really is going to tell the tale in terms of what your highs are going to be. Now, again, as I mentioned, this was from earlier this morning. As of the time of this video, we are probably well into the 80s, if not early 90s, or low 90s, I should say, across Dodge City and much of Kansas and Nebraska. So I just wanted to underscore, though, that as a forecaster, that's something that we really look out for. So places like Kansas, even East Central Kansas, and much of the Central Plains, we can certainly expect these temperatures to go well past 100, especially if we get a very stout temperature inversion like we saw this morning across Dodge City, Kansas. Taking a look here at the model guidance for the 500 millibar jet, this is our mid-level jet. As you can see, a very strong heat dome pretty much encompassing where those excessive heat warnings are across much of the Central Plains, getting back into the lower Great Lakes. Eventually, as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, you do start to see that center of the ridge begin to retreat back into the southwest of the United States, which would actually allow for some jet flow to get back into the lower Great Lakes, possibly producing some shower and thunderstorm chances later on towards the weekend into early next week. I will say, though, for folks in the Northeast getting back into the upper Midwest, even those especially in the Northeast and the New England area, you can certainly expect some potential for shower and thunderstorm activity periodically throughout the week, because typically when you have jet flow go across the periphery of your upper level ridge, that hot air dome that we talk about, you can get these little jet perturbations that can actually produce some shower and thunderstorm activity and the potential for some severe weather, which we'll have to monitor later on this week. But the main focus on this map is that you really see this ridge locking in for a large chunk of the country, and that's going to keep the heat pretty much trapped in this region of the lower 48, and thereby making it seem very oppressive outside over these next few days. The other thing we have to factor in too, of course, is the humidity. And we're taking a look here at the latest in terms of your 850 jet, or what we call the low-level jet. And as you can see, you have easterly flow coming up from the Gulf, and that eventually goes clockwise into the Midwest and lower Great Lakes. And what that means is that's actually going to help us increase our heat indices for much of the region. We're getting a lot in the way of moisture advection, sort of that clockwise flow in association with that high pressure, and that's going to keep things very humid, not just hot and oppressive, but humid for much of the lower Great Lakes getting back into the Midwest and central United States. And so that is what's going to potentially lead to some of our very dangerous heat indices getting upwards of 115 and even a maximum potentially in some spots of 120 for this area of the country. So you can thank your low-level jet for that, and you can also thank on the synoptic scale your broad heat dome, that ridge of high pressure that really locks in to this part of the USA. So as we move on, this is our temperatures for Monday and Tuesday. You can see a lot of the warmth really being centered across the Missouri Valley back towards the Central Plains. You got some spots getting upwards of 102 to 103, and I certainly expect that as that temperature inversion gets mixed out from this morning. And we have an inversion into tomorrow that will also be mixed out, which will contribute to some of the heat. You notice, though, that back towards Lake Michigan, you do see temperatures getting into the low 90s getting into tomorrow, but that's only for areas inland. So near the lakeshore, you actually see sort of that easterly flow to where you get more of a lake breeze component. And that's where our questions lie in terms of the maximum heat potential getting into Wednesday and Thursday, which we'll talk about here in a second. But the point is, at least for your Monday and Tuesday, we do have some heat advisories out, but near the lakeshore of Chicago and Milwaukee, it actually should help to shunt some of that warmer temperatures away from the lake. We may even see some highs barely breaking 80 across portions of Chicago and Milwaukee. So the main heat for Monday and Tuesday is going to be for the plains. Again, expect temperatures to be in the 100s. This model, by the way, is a North American model that we pulled from College of DuPage. We are not using GFS. It does tend to be a little bit more aggressive on the GFS. The NAM and the Euro have been pretty much in agreement in terms of the high temperatures. I think the GFS is over mixing the temperatures, so I think the NAM and the Euro, especially this map you're looking at right now for Monday and Tuesday, are really representing the temperatures quite well, and I would tend to point you guys in that direction in terms of what we're going to see for this Monday-Tuesday time frame. As we go forward into your Wednesday and Thursday, this is starting first with Wednesday. Take a look at the heat, right? We're seeing temperatures of 109, if not even 110 in some spots across Iowa. And that heat even makes its way back into the lower Great Lakes. And as I mentioned, we do have the potential for a lake breeze getting into Thursday, but at least according to the North American model, we have more of that southwesterly flow making its way up into the lower Great Lakes. And depending on that warm air advection regime, especially that moist air advection regime and associated with a low-level jet, that actually could help to perturb any lake breeze that could fire off the lake. So we have to really watch this. We could potentially be seeing close to record-breaking temperatures for this time of year in northern Illinois. We do have some readings of 101 to 104 out by Rockford, Freeport. As we get up to Wisconsin, you are seeing temperatures near 100 as well towards Milwaukee and back towards Madison. But once again, just like for Monday and Tuesday, the Central Plains will continue to see that heat with 105 and 106. And to be honest with you guys, I think the worst of the heat really is going to be for the Central Plains and even getting back into portions of Iowa and Missouri. That's not to say that we aren't going to see some extreme heat indices for portions of Illinois and Wisconsin, but there are still questions remaining in terms of how strong that moisture advection regime is, how far and how close it will get to northern Illinois, as well as what the lake breeze will do for Wednesday and Thursday. Will we even have a lake breeze on Wednesday and Thursday? Speaking of Thursday, let's take a look at that. Perfect example of the lake breeze, right? I've mentioned that about 5 times during this video. Well, now Thursday is a great example of that because this time around we have more of a northerly component, and that lake breeze then will move south into portions of the Chicago metro, keeping a lot of your warmth more confined to central Illinois, and then once again for the 4th day in a row, the Central Plains getting back into the south central U.S. So I've mentioned Chicago, I mentioned Milwaukee. There are certainly questions relating to the expansiveness of this heat for both Wednesday and Thursday. We will keep you guys updated here on the channel if anything changes on that front. But that is certainly something that we have to consider going forward because that lake breeze could mean the difference between 80-degree day in Chicago or 100-degree day in Chicago as well as Milwaukee. And to conclude today's video, we're going to take one last look here at the tropics. And boy, we have a lot of activity out in the Atlantic with 4 systems, with 2 of them named, Emily being a post-tropical storm. And we do have an area of concern off the African coast, which does have the potential to develop into a tropical system later on down the line. Now, the good news is with these current tropical storms that have been named, both Franklin and Gert, these are expected not to impact the U.S. mainland. So the good news there is that there are no immediate concerns with those 2 systems, and they are expected to eventually weaken. Franklin is expected to weaken. We do expect Gert to eventually become a hurricane, but that's going to be well off the coast and essentially just be in the middle of the Atlantic when it dies out. The immediate concern right now is going to be System 9 that's right here in the Gulf of Mexico. As we talked about in the top of our video, we have easterly flow coming across the Gulf of Mexico, which is allowing for a large swath of convection to take shape. And so as a result of that favorable environment, along with very warm waters, we are expecting System 9 to eventually form into a tropical storm and make its way into the southern Gulf shore of Texas by Tuesday morning. We're going to provide a video update more extensively on this system as it's named tomorrow. We'll provide you the latest in terms of rainfall amounts, impacts in terms of damaging winds, etc., for the southern Gulf shore of Texas, and that's going to impact Galveston getting back into San Antonio. I certainly can tell you now that I think the main threat here is once again going to be flash flooding. We have an area of Texas that's going to be impacted essentially, so the Gulf shore and inland, that is experiencing exceptional to extreme drought. So a lot of this rainfall is going to really dump on at once. We could have some high rainfall rates with this, and that's going to lead to runoff and eventually some flash flooding. So we will provide a more extensive update for you on that tomorrow, really focusing on an update relating to the heat wave impacting the central United States, but also the eventual naming of System 9 as it is anticipated to develop into a tropical storm once it makes landfall in Galveston, Texas tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's video. And as I said at the beginning of today's video, if you do enjoy, be sure to like and subscribe, share with family and friends, and we will see you all on the next video.